Hello and welcome to Beyond Reproach. This is Stephanie Domingo.
Tux Lurzel.
And we be drinking and we be swearing.
Mm-hmm.
This is the show about scandals and scandalousness in American politics and government.
Yes, today we are drinking, it's called a Ramos Gin Fizz.
Yes.
It is very fancy and pretty time-consuming and complicated. It is a quintessentially Southern cocktail. Should we go for it? Take a sip?
Yes. Let's cheers first.
Oh, yeah.
Ooh. Wow. That is delicious.
It's really, really tasty.
Oh, no. Yeah, it tastes like a creamsicle.
Yeah.
Like a tart creamsicle.
So this is also known as a New Orleans fizz, and it was said to be a favorite of Huey P. Long.
Ooh.
He loved these. The Ramos Gin Fizz was invented in 1888 by Henry Charles Ramos at the Imperial Cabinet Saloon in New Orleans. And it was basically an instant hit. At the end of the 1800s, they were everywhere in the South, especially in New Orleans.
Yeah.
Before long, the bar that he worked for was often filled with as many as 20 bartenders and, quote, shaker boys.
Ooh.
That would just be standing there
Dancing?
shaking cocktails.
Of course.
In his book, Famous New Orleans Drinks and How to Make 'Em, Stanley Clisby Arthur writes, the core of busy shaker boys behind the bar was one of the sights of the town during Carnival. And in 1915 Mardi Gras, 35 shaker boys nearly shook their arms off, but were still unable to keep up with the demand.
Yeah, the fact that you have to shake this cocktail for 2 minutes straight is pretty insane.
You shake it for about 2 minutes now,
Yeah.
But back then, before they really understood the science behind how to get like the maximum amount of froth and foam out of an egg white, the original recipe called for one cocktail to be shaken for 12 minutes solid.
Stop it.
12 minutes.
That's insane.
Yes. Thanks to modern mixology, we now know the most efficient way to the steps to get as much froth out of your cocktail as possible, as quickly as possible. Mm-hmm. So you do what's called a dry shake that doesn't have any ice in it to get the egg white frothy, but not have the ice watering down the cocktail.
Oh, okay, I see. Yeah.
And then you add ice and do another
volume.
shake. Yeah. Even today, even with the 2 minutes versus 12, it's still a pretty time consuming and kind of complicated. There's multiple steps. There's all these ingredients. It also calls for some kind of slightly hard to find. Well, I guess the orange blossom water is really the only ingredient that would be hard to find. But,
okay.
I live in Brooklyn where you can get everything, and it was still kind of hard to track down.
It's in the water fountains.
Yeah. So, this drink tastes like a grown-up adult creamsicle.
It's so fluffy and delicious.
Yeah. It's weird because there's no orange juice in it, just orange blossom water, lime juice, and lemon juice, and cream. Old Tom gin, powdered sugar.
Powdered sugar?
Yeah, most recipes you'll find on the internet call for simple syrup, but the original recipe that Ramos wrote down called for powdered sugar, so I used powdered sugar because I wanted it to be more authentic.
It's delicious.
There's also, I added just a touch of vanilla extract to the top of the foam at the end. You can't really see what the cocktail looks like, but it's in a tall, skinny glass, and it has this big 2-inch tall cap of white foam at the top. It's really cool.
Yeah.
The vanilla extract is said to be a kind of a controversial ingredient. Some people say that it was Ramos's secret ingredient in making the cocktail. You just kind of finish with it. You don't add it to the cocktail when you mix it. You just put it on top. But then other people say he never used vanilla. So it's a bit controversial, but I think it adds something.
Okay.
And then it's served with a straw. It's real pretty, and it's
beautiful.
Super delicious. It's like a dessert drink.
Yeah.
I guess they used to kind of serve it as a breakfasty kind of drink. They say that it's good for a hangover because it's like the hair of the dog and the egg white and the cream kind of coat your stomach and make you feel better.
Okay.
Yeah. But I think it's appropriate for my story today because my story, it's
not New Orleans, but it's the South,
not New Orleans,
right?
yeah. It's in the South. It starts kind of at the end of the 1800s. This was invented in 1888. My story starts 5 years later.
Okay.
But it spans several decades, but I thought I would just go for the earliest part of the story to start with in the Ramos Gin Fizz. I've had this before, and I've wanted to make it on the show for 2 years, and I'm excited that season 3 we finally get to make it.
You did it.
Welcome to season 3. We're having a Ramos Gin Fizz.
Yeah.
Finally, after all this time.
Starting it off strong. I like it.
We'll put up the recipe anyways, obviously, but I think most people are probably not going to be making this at home.
It's very labor intensive.
Yeah.
Even watching it, I'm like, come on now.
I know. Yeah. But if you ever make it down to the South, especially to
New Orleans,
make sure you try it for yourself. It's really good.
Yeah, I had it in New Orleans the last time I was there for the first time, and it was sweeter, but everything's sweeter in the South.
I did reduce the sugar just a little bit.
It's significantly sweeter.
Yeah. The first time I made it, it was sweeter, and I reduced the sugar just a little bit, but I was just like, I don't want to be drinking dessert.
Yeah, no, I only had one for that reason.
Yeah. I wish that I had done this for like a Huey P. Long episode, but whatever. Oh, whale.
Oh, whale.
When I was a kid at school learning the golden rule, teacher often used to say, if you don't tell a lie, there's not a reason why you can't be like Washington someday. How could Washington be a married man and never, never tell a lie?
Let's get into it. I'm going to take another ship.
Yeah, do it. It's so good. I love how tangy it is.
Mm-hmm. Have you ever heard of the United Daughters of the Confederacy?
Oh, wow. They're in my story, too.
No way, really?
Like a blip.
Okay.
A blip. Literally a blip. And I was going to ask you if you knew. I know about them from Blanche.
This is my whole intro.
Oh,
is that I know about them because of Blanche.
Okay.
That's so funny. Yeah, so I had heard of them because I watch a lot of the Golden Girls, and Blanche has mentioned in several different episodes that she's a member of the United Daughters of the Confederacy.
Yeah.
There's actually lately, in the past couple months, there's been this clip circulating on the internet.
That's where I saw it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, recently.
So that clip is actually not from the Golden Girls. It's from the Golden Girls spin-off series that was called Golden Palace. Without getting too far into it, long story short, at the end of the series, The Golden Girls, B. Arthur, who played Dorothy, didn't want to be on the show anymore. She wanted to go on and have like a solo career. So she has herself written off the show.
Okay.
The remaining 3 women wanted to keep making money,
of course,
and keep making this show, but the writers thought that it would be weird to just keep the show going without that Dorothy character. So instead, they start a whole new show where the remaining 3 girls buy a hotel on Miami Beach, and they run a hotel.
Okay.
And it's called Golden Palace.
Oh.
So this is the premise of this spin-off series. It didn't last. I think it only lasted 1 season. It was pretty dumb.
Did you see it?
Yeah, I remember it.
Okay.
Because I used to watch The Golden Girls with my grandma when it was like on.
Yeah. Wow.
So in this clip that's been circulating on the internet, the hotel is hosting a meeting of the United Daughters of the Confederacy, and Blanche hangs a Confederate flag in the lobby. If we can find this clip, we'll put it in the show notes, or maybe try and put it on Instagram.
We can absolutely find it.
Yeah,
because I saw it on Instagram.
It's everywhere.
So,
yeah. So Don Cheadle is actually an employee at this hotel, and he tells Blanche that it's fucked up that she has a fucking Confederate flag hanging in the lobby of the hotel.
Yeah.
And that he's insulted and upset, and she basically acts like a Karen.
Yeah.
She doesn't want to hear it. She doesn't want to listen to him.
It's her heritage.
Yes, exactly. She's trying to educate him on what the Confederate flag means. She's going to educate a black man on what the Confederate flag means. Eventually he talks to her, and she listens, learns, and grows.
Oh. She does.
Yes. And so finally, after he kind of explains things to her and like where he's coming from, she finally realizes that just because she has these kind of fond family memories of Confederate symbols, doesn't mean that those same symbols can't mean something really horrific and hateful for somebody else.
Look at her getting lessons in the 80s.
Woke Blanche.
Yeah, here for it.
Who knew? All it took was Don Cheadle.
You just need one black friend.
So today I would like to propose a toast.
Ooh.
To symbols of hate and oppression and the white women who love them. So should we cheers to our toast here?
Yes.
I just need an excuse to have another sip of this drink. Ta-da.
There we go.
So after the Civil War, white Southern society was in a shambles. Their cities were destroyed. Their men were dead. The Civil War was the deadliest war in American history. I read something recently that if you adjusted up for population, like if the war had happened with today's population levels, it would be something like 6 million people dead.
Wow.
Yeah, because of what the population was back then versus now.
That's a lot.
So obviously that was on both sides. I think it was 600,000 people died at the time, but their population at the time was a tenth of what it is today. So after the war was over, obviously the South was really fucked up. And these sort of genteel Southern white women started forming, they were called Ladies' Memorials Associations.
Okay.
And the point was they wanted to help to care for the widows and children of the Confederate dead. They wanted to organize funerals and burials and reburials. Especially after big battles, what would happen was there would be like these giant mass graves. And what they were doing was going around and sort of exhuming those bodies and giving them individual Christian burials after everything was over. They also wanted to help fund and pay for new cemeteries and the care for new cemeteries. And they were fundraising for commemorative ceremonies and monuments to the dead. Which, immediately after the war, this is all completely understandable. A huge percentage of their population had died. The war was fought for fucked up reasons, but it's understandable.
I think the North was probably doing the same thing.
Totally. They had to have been. Yeah.
Yeah. That's when a lot of Civil War monuments in general started being built.
Yeah.
Even in the North.
Yeah. These ladies' memorial associations became really popular really fast. And they were super, super successful at raising money.
Uh-oh.
But, as the years went by, there was less and less of a need for these funerals and burials and care for widows and children. But the groups just kept growing and growing. And as time went by, the groups would get bigger. Little individual groups would start joining larger ones in towns next door. So they were kind of merging and becoming ever bigger and more official. And then...
It was like a social club at this point now?
Sort of, yeah, but they were funding memorials still. And so about 30 years after the Civil War, the United Daughters of the Confederacy was officially formed in Nashville, Tennessee in 1894.
Officially formed.
Yeah. Before, it was just kind of like a bunch of little ladies' memorial associations that kept merging. Okay. But it wasn't until 30 years after the war that it...
What year is this again?
1894.
Okay.
Almost 30 years. So... The UDC's primary functions were constructing Confederate monuments and solidifying the place of women as cultural and historical gatekeepers of the Old South. So what exactly does that mean?
Basically, it sounds good, but I know it isn't.
Yeah. Basically, they wanted to control the narrative.
Oh.
They wanted to kind of like be in charge of what the story was that they had been through, what they'd been through. So have you heard of the Lost Cause?
No.
It's hard to describe exactly what it is, especially quickly, but it's kind of just this like way of thinking about things, almost like an entire cultural movement in the South where they were trying to rewrite their own story.
Like that they won?
Not that they won, but like why, the reasons the war had been fought and like what things were
rights.
Like. Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So,
so it's like a new marketing campaign.
Totally. Yeah. So from the very beginning of the founding of this country, Americans have been very, very good at lying to themselves about who we are. Whew. If someone was born even before the country officially became its own independent nation, you were born in this country under a system of slavery. And even if you were white and you were completely benefiting from that system and participating in it, you were still born into it. And people basically just had to find ways to lie to themselves to make it okay.
Of course,
that they were participating in this horrific system.
Everyone is the hero of their own story.
Exactly.
Which is terrifying.
People used the Bible to justify slavery.
Of course. Yeah.
They basically just told themselves, like, we are good people. I am a good person.
Yeah.
I treat my slaves well, and they're happy, and everyone's fine, and everything is fine, and we're just going to keep moving along.
Yes.
So when the war ended and slaves were freed and they left, people were shocked because they had been lying to themselves for so long that to tell themselves that they were good people and that they treated their slaves well and their slaves were happy in this system, when the slaves up and left them, they were shook.
Really?
Like, couldn't believe it.
Wow.
Yeah. I was reading a section in the Civil War from Howard Zinn's book, A People's History of the United States. And he has some like firsthand letters that were written right after the slaves were freed. People were gooped that their slaves would up and leave them because they really thought like, you know, I'm treating my slaves well. They are happy here. They like this system just as much as I do. They just want to help. Yeah. They really had been lying to themselves.
But all the rape, all the beatings and hangings. Oh, okay.
I think people had blinders on, you know.
Wow. That's
obviously, I'm sure the people that were really, really horrific to their slaves obviously didn't believe that, but there were a lot of people who did and could not. I think more women than men probably because they weren't as involved in the management of their slaves necessarily.
But they still saw women,
it doesn't make any
being
sense.
ripped from their hands.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
But they found ways to lie to themselves and think that it was okay. So when the war was over, the slaves were freed and they left. They were like, wait a minute, slavery is bad? Like, the whole time? What's happening here? The bottom line is they lost the war and they lost big. Yeah. And the whole thing had been fought over slavery and they knew it and they kind of had to reckon with that. And they didn't want to. Of course not. It's a bad look. They didn't want to deal with that. So after Reconstruction, we haven't really done a full episode on Reconstruction before.
Reconstruction is massive.
It's such a big topic. Yeah.
Ooh.
Basically, real quick, what happened was after the Civil War, when the Union won, they kind of sent soldiers down to the South to make sure that the South would allow black people to kind of like have a seat at the table to participate in their government and in the rebuilding of the South and the management of the New South. This lasted, what was it, like 10 years, 15 years, something like that?
Something like that, yeah.
But then when the Union pulled out of the South was like, fuck this shit. Get these black people out of here. Yeah. They're not supposed to be a part of the running of this country. So basically the white people took over again. When Reconstruction was over, the whole South sort of under this like lost cause idea decided they were all going to start living under this different delusion and lying themselves about something else. And that was that the whole war had been fought over something entirely different, that it wasn't about slavery at all. So if you're sitting here listening to this at home.
That's hilarious.
And you're saying to yourself, hey, wait a minute, wait. The Civil War wasn't fought about slavery. This was about states' rights. If you're saying that, congratulations. You have officially been indoctrinated by the mythology of the lost cause.
Yeah.
I am going to say unequivocally that the Confederacy was founded on slavery and white supremacy.
Yeah.
To prove this, all you need to do is look at the declarations of secession that were submitted by Southern states when they left the Union, or look at the way the practice of slavery was treated in writing the Confederate Constitution.
Yeah. Ooh.
Or you could read the speech that Alexander Stephens, the vice president of the Confederacy, wrote, saying that the Confederacy's, quote, cornerstone rests upon the great truth that the Negro is not equal to the white man, that slavery, subordination to the superior race, is his natural and normal condition. He said, this, our new government, is the first in the history of the world based upon this great physical, philosophical, and moral truth. So, plain as day, there you have it. The cornerstone of the Confederacy was slavery and white supremacy, without a doubt.
Yeah, period,
yeah. Nevertheless, the goal of the Lost Cause was to rewrite the history of the South and the history of the Civil War and the Confederacy to be more sympathetic to the South. There were three main focuses in their sort of mythology. The first is that the Civil War was simply a struggle for Southern independence over Northern aggression. They call it the War of Northern Aggression for a reason.
Heard that, yeah.
Rather than being about maintaining slavery, which I've already mentioned.
Yeah.
B, that slaves were treated well.
Whoa.
that they had enjoyed being civilized by white society.
Oh, wow. Yes.
And that they had never even wanted to be freed in the first place. But these northern abolitionists just couldn't help themselves.
But all the runaways.
Fucked everything up.
Yeah. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're kind of living through a time where there's another mythology happening in real time.
Exactly. To perpetuate this kind of idea, they loved to talk about happy slaves.
Of course, yes.
Especially the house slaves that worked in the big house with the family, and they saw them as a part of the family.
Yeah, because some of them at least didn't poison the family.
Yeah.
A lot did, though.
I wish it had been more of them.
Yeah.
This would be like the Mammy figures, the Uncle Tom figures.
Yeah.
They love to talk about
Of
mammies.
course.
Yeah.
Of course.
And then C, the third goal was to insist that the war had only been lost because the noble, honorable Southern armies were simply outnumbered by the North. They insisted that Confederate soldiers were both more courageous and had more military skill than anyone in a Northern army, but that they had just simply been overwhelmed by the Union's greater manpower, industrial force, and cold-hearted ruthlessness.
But didn't they bring their enslaved people with them?
It completely ignores a
all
lot
the
of facts.
Yeah, I'm like, but wait.
It ignores that Southern generals were often equally ruthless. It ignores that Union casualty rates were often just as high as Confederate ones. The war lasted 5 years, and it was not a sure thing.
No, but wow.
Yeah, I know. But they like to say that their reasons for fighting the war were completely noble and just and honorable, but they were destined to lose from the beginning. And that's actually where the term lost cause comes from, that they just didn't stand a chance, but that they were fighting this war anyways because it was the right thing to do.
They didn't stand a chance. What a way to look at a war.
Yeah. Well, they lost and they were just trying to cope
justify
with that.
it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It also contradicts what historians know about the Confederacy's wartime industrial capacity and their ability to field and supply huge armies. So it's just such a reach, but they went for it.
I can see how it's appealing, that sort of line of thought, obviously. Yeah. Like, it makes you feel good about yourself. It makes you feel good about your loser-ass cause, you know?
This was the prevailing cultural sentiment in the South at the time that the United Daughters of the Confederacy were formed.
Okay.
Those original ladies' memorial associations, when they were first formed, they had pretty benign intentions. But by the time the UDC, the United Daughters of the Confederacy, I'm going to say UDC for most of this. It's so much easier.
It's a mouthful.
Yeah. By the time the UDC was in the business of erecting Confederate monuments, they had shifted focus from erecting them in cemeteries as sort of like basically glorified tombstones.
No, that makes sense. It's like a memorial.
Yeah,
like it's
exactly.
the whole thing.
Yeah. But then by the time the UDC was in the business of doing it, they had shifted their focus to putting them prominently displayed on pedestals in front of courthouses, in front of schools, in town squares, near City Hall.
Wow.
And the subject matter of the monuments themselves had also shifted focus. Originally, they were meant to memorialize individual dead soldiers, groups of unnamed dead soldiers, that kind of thing. But by the time the UDC was putting up monuments 30 years later, it was more about glorifying, almost deifying Southern leaders and Confederate generals.
Okay.
So after Reconstruction, I already kind of mentioned that, like, for a brief period, Black people were involved in building the new government in the South. But after Reconstruction was finally sort of over and white people had control again, they were worried about the idea that Black people would want to be in positions of power and to make decisions about how the government would be run. So putting up these monuments was kind of one more way for them to say, like, looky here.
Yeah, remember
this is who is in charge of the South.
Yeah.
The white people with the military training, we're the ones in charge. So you need to sit the fuck down. Mm-hmm. So when do you think the bulk of these monuments were put up?
Between 1920 and like the 60s? 70s? No, actually maybe 75, I'd say. Like civil rights, through civil rights.
So there actually are two distinct like sort of separate periods and there was a little break in the middle.
Anytime black people got any sort of power or like equality, then there's a rise in it, right?
Totally.
Of course.
Well, so the first period started right around 1900.
Okay.
And lasted well into the 1920s. It started...
Reconstruction.
This was after Reconstruction. But it was just around this time that Jim Crow laws were being put into place in southern states. And lasted well into the 20s when the Ku Klux Klan was at their peak in the U.S. And by this point in the 20s, the UDC was not even trying to hide the fact that they were a white supremacist, or at least had white supremacist ties and beliefs. They actually erected a monument to the KKK in 1926.
I'm aware of it.
Yeah.
Is this Stone Mountain?
I don't actually know what it is. I didn't even want to devote any mental energy to looking up.
No, and I get that. For real.
So it was pretty rare that their monuments ever featured a black American, Of course. But in the few rare cases that they did, they were always portrayed as these like contented, loyal servants.
Of course.
In 1914... the UDC was given an opportunity to put a Confederate monument in Arlington National Cemetery.
What?
Yeah. And to help foster the idea that black people were not even just willing, but eager to fight alongside their enslavers, kidnappers, and torturers for the Confederacy, they used the imagery of both a weeping mammy figure holding a white child.
Oh, yes.
And an image of an enslaved black man marching alongside his enslaver into battle in this monument. And this monument still stands in Arlington National Cemetery.
Yikes.
I looked it up. I looked up pictures of it. And then in
I mean, I'm not surprised.
Yeah, I know.
But yeah, it's garbage, truly.
And then in 1923... the UDC lobbied to erect a monument in Washington, D.C., quote, in memory of the faithful slave mammies of the South.
No.
Yeah.
No.
And the Senate was like, yeah, that's a great idea. I love it.
Wait, what year was this?
1923.
Okay, yeah, that sounds about white.
So Senate voted to make this happen, to let it happen. Thankfully, it did not.
The horror.
I don't know why it didn't exactly, but it...
One person with sense. And
I know. It was like, wait a minute, hold up. I doubt that there was, like, someone with sense involved. I bet that there was, like, a bump in the road and they didn't make it happen.
Like, fell through the
But whatever cracks. It was, thank the Lord, there is no Mammy Memorial in Washington, D.C. What a mess. Yeah, so the first peak of the building of monuments was between 1900 and the 1920s. It was at its highest point around 1910.
Okay.
I actually have a graph that you can look at. I'll try and put it on Instagram and in the show notes that shows like
the dips.
The peaks and valleys of when these monuments were going up. The first one there was definitely the biggest push to erect these monuments was in the early 1900s. But then, like you mentioned, there was another second wave that had a significant push in the 1950s and 60s because of civil rights. They saw that there was a growing movement for public support for racial equality.
And they're like, nope.
Yeah. They
Can't
saw
have that.
Yeah. Public opinion was starting to shift, and the old guard in the South was like, no, we can't let this happen.
No.
So
we are heroes.
Yeah, exactly. So they wanted to make sure that future generations of Southern whites would keep believing this like revisionist.
Well, they do.
Yeah, exactly.
So good job.
Exactly. Today, it's pretty ironic that there's all this push to tear down a lot of these monuments, and there's all these grumblings from people saying, you're trying to destroy history, you're destroying history, you're erasing history. In reality, the entire reason these monuments were put up in the first place was to do exactly that. They were meant to erase history, or at least to edit history.
Yes, to shape it to fit their narrative.
Exactly. So if anything, taking them down is an effort to correct history.
Yeah, definitely.
And make a more realistic and accurate history.
Boo!
Well, who needs that? Ugh, gross. History is boring. Let's just have the fun one where white people are in charge. Ugh. Today, a shameful number of Americans do not believe that slavery was the primary cause of the Civil War.
Yikes.
A poll that was released in 2015 shows that 41% of Americans believe that the Civil War was about states' rights.
Wow. Whoa. Wow.
41%. I mean, I guess they're not wrong if the right that we're talking about is the right to own slaves. But yeah.
Wow.
States' rights. And that same poll said that 37% of Americans believe that children should not be taught in schools that slavery was the primary cause of the Civil War.
Weird.
So this kind of brings me to
why even send kids to school if we're just going to lie to them?
Right? Exactly. I know. It doesn't make any sense.
Stay home and watch cartoons? I do understand wanting to shield your child from the deeper truths and brutalities of it, but to not
But
teach
to just
them
say
at
that
all,
the war was about something completely different
that's
bullshit.
Wow. That's
so
crazy.
This brings me to my main focus today and the other major
Wait, what?
function. Yes,
this is
exactly.
Your main focus?
Yes. The other major function of the United Daughters of the Confederacy, they were not just putting up Confederate monuments. Their main work was pumping out lost cause propaganda and carefully controlling the way American history was taught to children.
No.
Yes.
No, I thought it was just the monuments.
Nope. You thought wrong.
Fuck. How has this story that was already terrible to begin with take such a drastic turn? Is this why Texas has all the school books?
So you know a little bit about this, yeah.
No, I know that a lot of books come out of Texas and they're full of lies.
Oh, that they're published in Texas. That I don't know exactly.
Oh, okay.
I will talk about Texas a little bit later, but it's not the publishing of books.
Okay.
I don't know why Texas is where the base is for where a lot of textbooks are published.
There has to be a reason.
Could be part of a major part of it.
Okay.
For sure. I didn't investigate that aspect, though.
It sounds like your story is already so big.
I know.
So I'm just going to shut my damn mouth.
Historian Karen Cox wrote in her 2003 book, Dixie's Daughters, that the UDC's biggest goal was to indoctrinate white Southern children in the lost cause, thus creating living monuments. Yes. She said they had a multi-pronged approach to doing that. It involved going into schools and putting up battle flags and portraits of generals. It meant getting schools renamed for famous Confederates.
Whoa, they did that?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, fuck.
It was creating the children of the Confederacy.
See, okay, I hate to interrupt you.
No.
But this is what happens when women aren't working. Go on.
Yes, they're busying themselves with horrific shit.
God.
Yeah, she says it was creating the children of the Confederacy, which was their formal youth auxiliary, so that the UDC could draw membership from the group when they became adults. Children were always involved in the unveiling of monuments. They would select one child to pull the cord, and then there'd be cheers when the monument was unveiled. Children in the stands would form what they called a living battle flag. Then they sang Southern patriotic songs.
Wow.
The UDC also published books for children and memoirs to influence Southern children.
Children aren't reading memoirs.
Well, back in the day, they might have been. Before what? TV.
I'm just picturing a little child with spectacles.
And a swastika.
Yeah, it's feeling very Hitler Youth-ish.
Yeah, totally, yeah. So, along with the cooperation of Southern school boards, the UDC also sponsored essay contests focused on lost cause mythology veiled as history lessons.
No.
And one of their most popular essays was on the history and origins of the KKK.
Stop it.
Yes. This essay,
that's so blatant.
Thousands of children in the South every year were writing essays in school to send to the UDC.
Is this still happening?
No. This was the 1920s and 30s, yeah.
You never know.
I know.
I just had to ask.
Some of this stuff is kind of still happening a little bit, but not like this anymore.
Wow. So what were these kids writing? Did you read any of these essays?
No, I don't. This is another thing where it's I'm glad that I know this, but I don't want to devote any more mental energy to
That's real. I understand that completely. There were things in my scandal that I'm just let me look. And I'm nah.
Yeah, I don't need to know.
I don't need it. I know enough.
Yeah.
And I'm disgusted.
I'm glad that I know that it happened, and that's as far as I need to go with it.
Yeah.
In 1914, the UDC even published a book for children about the KKK. It was called the Ku Klux Klan or Invisible Empire, and it celebrated the Klan's fight against Reconstruction.
Holy shit.
During the Reconstruction period, sturdy white men of the South, against all odds,
Sturdy?
maintained
now.
white supremacy and secured Caucasian
Sturdy,
civilization.
big dicks.
I know, exactly. Yeah.
White men. Like, what?
Yeah.
Get the fuck out of here.
Secured Caucasian civilization when its very foundations were threatened.
Oh man, I've laughed myself into a sweat.
This book went on to accuse... This book was written for children. Again. Accuse black people of laziness and wanting handouts because they refused to keep working for free for their white enslavers after slavery was abolished.
Handouts like a salary.
Yeah, exactly. There was a period where the government was kind of helping feed people and make things...
Of course.
But
yeah.
like that was like immediately after the slaves were freed.
Yeah.
They were supposed to just like walk to town and get a job at
yeah,
Macy's.
who's gonna hire them? It's like, yeah, I'd like to be a lawyer, please.
Yeah,
like,
exactly. Yeah.
Come on.
Many Negroes conceived the idea that freedom meant secession from labor. So they left the fields, crowding into cities and towns, expecting to be fed by the United States government.
Wow. That is such toxic lying garbage.
Yes.
But a lot of Southerners believe this.
Totally.
There are Northerners who believe this as well.
Yeah, exactly,
but
yeah.
it's crazy that they're trying to get kids. Like, that's so malicious.
They know that they're easy to convince, you
Yeah.
know? Simple minds.
Their brains are still forming.
Exactly, yeah. This book went on to even highlight methods that the KKK used to terrorize black people during Reconstruction.
The kids' book has this?
Yes. Whoa. And praised the KKK for circumventing the law and taking the law into their own hands.
I have heard that sort of praise, like, for doing what needed to be done, sort of thing. Yeah.
It's awful.
Law and order.
But it's not law and order if you're circumventing the law.
Yeah.
It's fucking the opposite of law.
We are living in 1984.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
I love that red hat that says, make Orwell fiction again.
No. Yeah, seriously.
It's so good, but also it's so sad. Like, I laughed when I first saw it, and then I realized how true it is, and then I got sad.
So yeah, after this, it gets even worse.
Oh, God.
I
swear you always do this to me. You make this, like, beautiful, like, fruity drink. It's like...
Yeah, if the cocktail is fruity and pretty and delicious... Yeah. Just know that something horrible is happening.
I gotta go.
Oh no, it's too delicious. Something terrible is about to happen.
Oh my God, the sugar just hits my tongue, and I'm like, oh no.
The UDC's most effective tool for indoctrinating Southern children was controlling school textbooks.
How could they do that, though?
Life finds a way. In 1919... several different Confederate heritage associations, along with the UDC, they all kind of got together with the sole purpose of forming a committee to promote lost cause dogma and the lost cause version of history in school textbooks. This group became known as the Rutherford Committee, named after its most prominent member, the UDC's Mildred Lewis Rutherford. And old Mildred wrote a pamphlet called A Measuring Rod to Test Textbooks and Reference Books in Schools, Colleges, and Libraries. She wrote it herself, and it became the gold standard for what the Rutherford Committee and the UDC were to deem acceptable in a history textbook. Before long, Mildred also wrote another book that was essentially little more than a blacklist of textbooks that they found offensive to the UDC lost cause version of history. And so almost immediately after they were published, the UDC chapters across the South started lobbying their local schools and school districts and state governments to promote the books that they found acceptable and the books that they liked, and ban books that they found offensive to lost cause ideology. Because
banning books is always the sign of, like, a real democracy.
Yeah, exactly. In several states, the UDC was directly involved in reviewing history textbooks, and they were even allowed to send their reviews, approvals, and rejections directly to state textbook commissions. And in many cases, members of the UDC even got themselves appointed to these same state textbook commissions to make sure that they had as much influence as possible in the choosing of which school textbooks would be used in Southern schools. This basically meant that national book publishers needed to make a decision about if and how they would sell their books to the South. If they were going to go all in with this lost cause ideology in their school books, that would mean that they could only sell those books in the South because Northerners didn't want to hear the shit.
Yeah.
So what most book publishers did was write 2 different versions of the same book.
No.
They would have one version with a carefully worded, watered down version of Southern history, Civil War history, slavery history.
I mean, that explains so much.
Yeah, absolutely.
That explains everything, actually.
Right? Yeah, exactly.
Fuck. Okay.
And then they would have another version. Everything else would be the same, but then these little chapters on the history of the Civil War and slavery and that would be, for everyone else in the country, historically accurate, have facts in it. But the version for the South would be completely watered down and super carefully worded. Because if they didn't word it this way, they wouldn't be able to sell their books. The UDC would ban them. And they were in charge of these textbook commissions, so they had control.
It's scary how much control they had.
Yeah. Like you said, white women without jobs.
They are a force to be reckoned with.
So this meant that certain sections of these history textbooks, especially in the South, were really lean and really low on content.
Civil War is like a page and a half.
Yeah, exactly. So
it's mostly pictures.
Yeah. So Southern schools literally had to find supplementary books to use on units in the Civil War because there wasn't enough information.
What a bunch of losers.
Right? They would choose state history books that were written by local authors and local publishers.
Yeah, no, that's a thing. Yeah.
And they would have a much stronger lost cause bias than the general history books that they were using. In 1923, the UDC's North Carolina division endorsed a book called Young People's History of North Carolina. This book was used in North Carolina well into the 1940s. It blamed the struggle over slavery on overzealous and aggressive Northern abolitionists. It described the KKK in almost mystical terms. In the same paragraphs and units in the book where they discussed slavery, they would also talk about white indentured servants.
Of course.
Because they wanted to make sure that children equated slavery to working off a debt. Mm-hmm. This was a very, very common practice in UDC textbooks.
Yeah, so that, you were talking about North Carolina, right?
Yeah.
That's still in their books.
Oh my God.
As of last year. I saw something on Instagram that talked about how enslaved people were similar to, like, the poor immigrants.
That's so fucked up.
They worked alongside each other. I mean, they did, but that's not the whole story, obviously.
Obviously.
Duh.
It's revisionist history.
Yeah.
It's bullshit. So I have a quote from this book, The Young People's History of North Carolina. As a rule, the slaves were comfortably clothed, given an abundance of wholesome food, and kindly treated. As a rule.
As a rule.
Yeah. Occasionally, some hard-hearted master or bad-tempered mistress made the lot of their slaves a hard one, but such cases were not common. Cruel masters and cruel mistresses were scorned then, just as men and women who treat animals cruelly are now scorned. So you're comparing black people to animals?
Of
cool.
course.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
These slaves were brought into the colonies fresh from a savage life in Africa, and in 2 or 3 generations were changed into respectable men and women.
Yes, they were, quote, civilized.
Yes. This fact shows, better than any words can, how prudently and how wisely they were managed. These animals
Hey,
from
we
Africa.
can't rape and kill ourselves.
It's so fucked up. So obviously the UDC was banning any book that promoted what they saw as the northern view of history.
Wow.
But they were also going on to reject any books that, even if they followed Mildred Rutherford's guidelines, if the book was written by somebody who lived in the North or someone who is even educated in the North, the books were banned.
What?
It doesn't, it's so fucked up.
Wow.
And then they even started to try, they weren't
that.
exactly successful on this, but they were trying to ban Northerners who had moved to the South from teaching and from sitting in positions on Southern school boards.
Okay, I could see that.
Thankfully, by the 1930s...
I just love how afraid they were of the truth.
Seriously.
It's like, it's amazing. I love it.
So thankfully, by the 1930s, the power of the UDC had kind of started to wear off, started to wane a little bit. At this time in history, in the 30s, Civil War veterans were starting to die off. Anyone that had actually been through the Civil War was starting to die off. The country had just been through the Great War, or World War I, for those of you who don't know. And we were entering the Depression. So the younger generation in the South had less interest in fighting for this like legend of the lost cause. However, the UDC's propaganda machine had been incredibly successful in indoctrinating multiple generations of Southern men and women already.
Yeah.
So politicians who had grown up being taught lies in schools just picked up where the UDC left off.
Yep.
And these lost cause textbooks, most of the time, just stayed in these schools, even though the UDC had less influence.
Yeah, if it's not broke, don't fix it. Like, I could see them just, letting it ride.
Yeah. This is what they learned, so their children should learn the same thing that they did. In the 1950s, as the civil rights movement was gaining steam in the South, these lost cause stands were digging in their heels.
Yes.
I already mentioned that they were building Confederate monuments.
Yes.
But at the same time, there was another second wave of new revisionist lost cause textbooks. In 1957, Virginia commissioned several many new books.
Several many.
Including Virginia, History, Government, Geography, which presented slavery in very positive terms.
Ooh.
A feeling of strong affection existed between masters and slaves in a majority of Virginia homes.
Oh, I guess that justifies all the rape.
Enslaved people were happy to be in Virginia and were better off than they would have been in Africa.
They would have had their families, though.
That don't matter.
Yeah. Mothers don't care about their children. Only white mothers care about their children.
Yeah. This book also said abolitionists lied about slavery in the South. That slavery was bad. This was a lie.
I'm like, be specific.
Slavery is not bad. Come on.
Come on.
This book also has illustrations showing happy, captive Africans wearing Western dress clothes, shaking hands with their new masters on slave ships. I'm going to show you.
That is...
But we'll put this on our Instagram as well.
That is hilarious.
It's insane.
Wow, I like that she's wearing, like, knickers and then, like, a dress over that and then socks and shoes.
Yeah, fresh from Africa. Fresh from a savage life in Africa.
Yeah. Her hair is braided, but everything else is, like, Western style. That is... Oh, wow, and the mother's wearing a bonnet?
Yeah.
What the fuck?
Welcome to America.
Oh, that is really malicious.
Ugh.
Yikes.
So then another book that they commissioned at this time was it was a high school history book called Cavalier Commonwealth, which said that slaves, quote, did not work so hard as the average free laborer since he did not have to worry about losing his job. In fact, the slave enjoyed what we might call comprehensive social security. Generally speaking, his food was plentiful, his clothing adequate, his cabin warm, his health protected, and his leisure carefree.
So
Don't
carefree.
You know? It's ridiculous. I want to laugh.
It sounds
so
like
ridiculous.
It's so carefree. Like, why don't white people want to do it?
I know, exactly.
It seems like the life.
Well, it's the same as indentured servants, so white people were doing it, don't you know?
You're right, you're right.
It's so fucked up that this was being taught in schools by teachers
Possibly
to children.
Still being taught in schools by teachers to children.
These books were not phased out of use in Virginia until the 1970s. Mississippi's public schools used lost cause textbooks exclusively until 1980, and they only stopped using them because of a lawsuit from the NAACP and a federal court order.
Yeah.
Like you said, we're still using them in some places.
Still using them all over the South.
In Texas, in 2010, The Board of Education voted to remove slavery as the central cause of the Civil War and replaced it with states' rights and secession. It wasn't until 2 years ago from today, that the standards were revised to include slavery with equal weight as states' rights and secession.
Still lies.
Yeah, states' rights, if the right you're talking about is the right to own slaves.
It's just so hard for white America to come to grips with this thing that happened for generations. It's just...
Yeah. Well, that's the whole...
Especially when you lie to yourself for so long, too.
Exactly.
To even come close to the truth now feels like blasphemy.
Exactly. It's so much easier to just keep lying.
Yeah.
And then when anyone tries to call it out, they just get angry.
Yes.
So in 2018, a homework assignment was given to a class of 8th graders at a school in San Antonio, Texas. It was a worksheet titled The Life of Slaves, A Balanced View.
Ooh.
And the children were told to list the negative and positive aspects of slavery.
I saw that, yeah. A lot of the black students were just leaving the positive, like, fuck you. What is this?
Yeah, exactly. So parents complained basically like instantly to the school board.
Yeah.
Some parents put it on social media, put pictures of it, and then the media caught wind of it, and it was a pretty big scandal.
It's outrageous.
It's ridiculous. Fuck you.
A balanced view?
Oh my God. In 2018, you're trying to teach children that there were positive aspects of slavery. So the school board launched an investigation. They suspended the teacher and made an audit of the textbook that the lesson came from. And then the publisher of the book basically came back and was like, well, we haven't published that book since 2007. They said, the book is out of print and we have ceased sales. But so this was okay to say this in 2007? Are you fucking kidding me?
Apparently, yeah.
Thankfully, though, lost cause mythology is becoming more and more rare. Even in Southern schools, it is being phased out. More accurate versions of history are being taught in schools.
That's good.
The UDC has a lot less influence than they used to.
I mean, it's really late, but that's good.
I know.
I'll
but
take
thankfully,
it.
even the generations of people who were children that were taught by the UDC, those people are even sort of dying off and no longer active in school boards and textbook commissions and that kind of thing. Thankfully. But don't worry, the UDC is still around. They're still kicking. These days, they're spending a lot of their time suing state and local governments for taking down monuments that they put up. They even threatened legal action against officials in Franklin, Tennessee, when the city announced plans not to take down a UDC monument, but to add markers in the same park as their monument, recognizing African-American historical figures.
Oh.
The UDC threatened to sue.
Not surprised.
And according to a recent Washington Post article, along with a few other Confederate heritage associations, the UDC has put up at least 20 new monuments this year. But now they're putting them on private property now.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
That's fine.
They're trying to put them up in like near highways and stuff so that people can see them as they're driving by. But they're not in like public squares so that the government can't force them to come down, basically.
Okay.
So yeah, the United Daughters of the Confederacy, they're, I think, one of the major reasons that Americans are so ill-informed about our own history.
Yeah.
And
seems that way.
One of the reasons why white supremacy and racism are still so deeply ingrained in our society. It
explains so much.
Yeah, literally. It often feels like when you see people saying this kind of shit on, especially on social media, it feels like these people saying these kinds of things are living in a completely different reality. And that's because they are.
They are.
Because their reality was built by design on misinformation and lies.
Oof.
It's insane.
Yeah.
Oh, that was not a fun story to tell.
It's a good one, though, because it really feels like exploratory, like foundational.
Totally
like
foundational. It explains so much about who we are today and why we believe the things we do.
It explains our history books, for sure. And why we believe, like, Mickey Mouse lies.
It's 160 years since the Civil War.
Yeah.
And we still believe this shit. And there's a reason.
That is sad, yeah.
It's bullshit, but there's a reason that it is the way it is. Hopefully now that we know this kind of thing, we can start to move forward.
But this is why people are upset about the 1619 possibly being taught in school. They're just like, oh, we can't tell kids the truth.
Yeah, exactly. We have to tell them lies on purpose.
Yeah, like...
Because it's easier to tell lies than to deal with and reckon with the truth.
What a world, what a world.
If you guys are looking for a new podcast to listen to, Stephanie and I were recently featured on an episode of a show called Peculiar Picture Show.
Yes.
And we actually talk a little bit about, we talk a lot about slavery and about...
Yeah, we reviewed 12 Years a Slave.
Yeah, the show is basically about movies.
Yeah.
And we watched 12 Years a Slave and reviewed it with them. But we talk a lot about the system of slavery.
Yeah.
And we kind of talk about school textbooks a little bit.
We do a little bit because their podcast is about, it's like movie reviews with like a mental health sort of perspective.
Yeah.
So yeah, we talked about mythology and lies.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So we don't talk about the UDC in this episode, but it explains knowing the UDC, how they were doing this and why they were doing it. It explains so much about who we are today.
Yeah.
Oh, well, on that note, it looks like, your cocktail's empty too.
Yeah. I needed it.
Oh, I know. That was a rough one.
I feel better informed, and it clears up so many questions that I kind of had lingering in the back of my mind, like how did this happen? When did this happen?
Yeah.
Because it's clear that it's by design.
Yeah.
So
screw you, Blanche. How dare you?
Seriously.
Okay, we'll be right back.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Jordan, the host of Heinous Hotels, a weekly podcast about notorious and remarkable hotels for people like me who want to have some history, ghost stories, true crime, and urban legends with their travel. Join me on your favorite podcast platform as I explore notorious and remarkable hotels all over the world, from your favorite travel destinations to places you haven't heard of yet. Pack your bags and don't forget your passport. Check into Heinous Hotels every week on Monday.
Okay, and we're back. Your story was a doozy.
Oh my God. Well, thank God we have gin.
Yes. It's so strong and it tastes like nothing, you guys, so beware. It packs a bit of a punch. I'm kicking things off this season with Mount Rushmore.
Yes! Amazing.
Everything about this national treasure is highly problematic. From its land to its symbolism, to the sculptor, to the presidents that he decided to blast their faces into a mountainside, even the name is a bunch of garbage.
I never even thought about the name.
We'll get to it. To top that all off, it was designed by a white supremacist who was once funded by the KKK.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah.
Wow. Why does this always happen? We always do these stories that are like completely overlapping and go so well together.
The scandal of Mount Rushmore, it spans over 100 years, so I'm going to have to gloss over a lot and jump around kind of achronologically. But it's a really, really, really important story, but we just don't have all day.
Yeah.
So I propose a toast. Let's raise our glass. A toast to struggle. What the aim of the struggle depends on who you ask.
Oh.
Okay, so it all started with Fort Laramie. The U.S. signed the Fort Laramie Treaty in 1868 with a tribal collective historically known as the Lakota Sioux. Do you know anything about the Sioux?
I've heard of the Lakota Sioux, but
It's made up of the Lakota tribe, the Dakota, and the Nakota peoples, like together as one. They went as the Sioux back then.
Okay.
So the Sioux together with the Arapaho tribe. This treaty created the Great Sioux Reservation, which takes up most of South Dakota and like parts of Nebraska.
Okay.
It was massive. It also designated the Black Hills as unceded Indian territory. For the exclusive use of native peoples. Guess where Mount Rushmore is?
Yeah, Black Hills, baby.
Sure is. Ding, ding, ding. So the treaty was signed to end years of bloodshed and raids along this trail called the Bozeman Trail. it was a shortcut to gold mines in the Montana Territory.
Okay.
So a lot of just like white settlers were like creeping on through this area that ran through the Arapaho and the Sioux hunting grounds.
Huh. Okay.
The trail opened 6 years before this treaty, and it just created a whole bunch of problems. There was a leader at the time, his name was Red Cloud, and he was not having it at all. He was just like, I am not down with this white encroachment shit. Like, it's a no for me, dog. I don't like it. So him and his allies, they unofficially shut down the trail.
Wow. Okay.
Hence the treaty. So at this time, the Sioux were wielding a kind of military power. They were so strong that President Grant realized that he could not win militarily against the Sioux. They were that powerful. So they had to sign this treaty for peace.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Good for them.
Right? It starts out good.
Yeah, exactly. We
Dun, dun,
want to say good
dun.
for them, but obviously we know how this
Yeah, we
this
know.
goes.
We know, but we really don't know. But yeah, we're not going to be surprised by the trajectory of this scandal.
I mean, we know where we are today.
Exactly. So there were a lot of terms in this treaty, and I'm not getting into it because it is pretty scandalous all in itself. You just need to know three things: that it closed the trail, it guaranteed exclusive tribal occupation of the reservation land, including the Black Hills, and it promised to destroy all the forts and like outcroppings that had crept up near the trail. Because there were just lots of forts, lots of white settlers just camping out by this trail that is on Indian land. So it promised to get rid of those. It was at the time a massive victory for the tribes. Despite some tribal leaders signing this in April when it was proposed, Red Cloud refused to sign it outright. It's like he sensed white devilry.
Yeah, imagine.
He waited until all the forts had been burnt to the ground by him and his friends 7 months later, and then he signed.
Okay. Good for him.
He didn't want to sign on promises alone, and I don't...
Because he has eyes and a memory.
Exactly. I like to call them eyeholes.
Yes. He has functioning eyeholes.
Correct.
And a functioning brain.
So he finally signed 7 months later, and so the land is theirs in perpetuity. It was great because the Black Hills, known in their language as Paha Sapa, which I'm sure I'm butchering because Lakota has a lot of like glottal stops, and I'm not even going to try because I know my limitations. But this area is the cultural center of their universe. Wow. It's like Mecca and Jerusalem all rolled into one. More than 50 different tribes have their origin stories tied to that land. It is a sacred place, so sacred that having a bunch of genocidal presidents carved into their place of worship by a white supremacist was a bit of a bummer.
Fuck. Wow, okay.
So how on earth did this monument get built on land exclusively for Native peoples? Gold. Gold, that's how.
Okay, I get it. Yeah.
Treaties are toilet paper with government signatures on them when they find profitable mineral resources.
Sure.
Yeah, it sucks. So this conflict set the stage for the famous Battle of Little Bighorn in 1876, and I'm not getting into this at all because it is its own scandal and it's big.
Yeah.
But that's where the Sioux Nation as a whole dealt a really crushing blow to the U.S. government's troops.
Wow, okay.
Yeah. Sadly, it was their last military victory.
Yeah.
The following year, the U.S. retaliated.
Uh-huh.
Are you shocked?
Gooped.
I'll give you a moment to collect yourself. In through the nose, out through the mouth. So Congress passed an act that basically redrew the whole lines of the Fort Laramie Treaty.
Okay.
Yeah. They stole back the Black Hills. They forced Native peoples onto permanent, much smaller reservations. Like all of their hunting area is gone now. They just have to farm, of course, on the worst farmland because they took the good ones. So, yeah. And it also allowed the U.S. to build roads through their lands.
So, I feel silly even asking this, but, like, there was a treaty.
I like that you feel silly.
So, like, was there any kind of, like, negotiations of the new terms of this?
No.
Oh, yeah, okay.
No. The answer is no.
Yeah.
Shit was incredibly petty. they did this just because they lost a really big battle.
Yeah.
And yeah, they didn't get any sort of tribal signatures after this. They're like, we're just doing this.
Okay.
This is what we're doing now. It was Tom Petty, Petty White.
Yes. Peppermint Petty.
Peppermint Petty, and also I saw on Twitter Petty Pendergrass. Like Teddy Pendergrass.
Yeah,
That's so good.
Petty LaBelle.
Yeah, Petty LaBelle, classic. I love her. So just really insanely, clearly petty, not cool.
Gross.
In the years that followed, the Great Sioux Reservation continued to lose territory. Since the land was so clearly stolen, the Sioux petitioned the government to argue their case before the Supreme Court. They finally won that right in 1920, but the legal battle continued. Mm-hmm. I'm just going to leave that there.
Okay.
Put a pin in it. I'm coming back to it. I'm coming back. On March 3rd, 1925, Congress authorized the carving of Mount Rushmore. But I have to pause here to quickly talk about the origins of the name Mount Rushmore. Do you know anything about it?
No, I literally know nothing. I've literally never even considered the fact that none of those men are named Rushmore.
Where is President Rushmore?
Yeah.
So it was named after the land was stolen, obviously, before it was carved up, after a New York City lawyer named Charles E. Rushmore. Yes, the monument was named after a man named Chucky.
But why? Fast talking city slicker.
So he was in the Black Hills in 1884, just kind of working for a mining company. He was a gold speculator, and he asked his local guide, a man by the name of Bill Chalice, like, "Hey, what's that mountain's name?" Mm-hmm. And Bill said, "Never had a name, but from now on we'll call it Rushmore."
Are you fucking kidding me?
And just like that, fucking Mount Rushmore was born. Can you believe that shit? Like my mouth fell to the ground.
And literally people were just like, yeah, that's
Yeah, it stuck. In 1930.
So it was called Mount Rushmore before it was a monument to shitty white supremacists.
They started calling it Mount Rushmore in 1884. Just on a whim. And it like inexplicably stuck. And then the Park Service in 1930, it became official. 3 years after the carving started. But it had been called Mount Rushmore by white locals since 1884.
Just because he asked.
Correct.
I cannot.
Correct. I feel like this is what Trump is saying when he wants to make America great again. Just like any dude can get a fucking mountain.
Oh my God.
Because he asks. So, just to be clear, obviously the mountain had a fucking name.
Yes.
People were living on that land for 10,000 years.
Yeah.
Like, it had a Lakota name. It just didn't have an English name.
Exactly, yeah.
And it's garbage. When I learned that, I'm just like, wow.
Well, that's like Mount McKinley, too.
Yeah.
It had a name.
Yeah. I'm just like, it has a name, you dumb bitch. Obviously. Anyways, moving on. Did you know that the original plan for Mount Rushmore included the carving of Native people?
Really?
Yes. Yes.
Really?
Even a Native woman. A lady people. The original idea came from a man named Doan Robinson, who was the state historian of South Dakota at the time. His idea was to build a tourist trap to bring money into the state. That was his whole big plan for this, for people to come into the state and empty their wallets. So his vision was a bunch of carvings of heroic figures of the West. People like Lewis and Clark, Sacagawea, Buffalo Bill Cody. The sculptor, who I will get to next, initially embraced the idea, but he wanted to go big, and he kind of put like his own spin on things.
Just fucking put up a wax museum like a normal person and move on.
I know. It's such garbage. Rather than sculpting Western heroes, including Red Cloud, as proposed, Gutzon, his name is Gutzon Borglum.
Oh my, okay.
Instead insisted that the carving should be a national monument commemorating America's founders and builders. I hate to say this twice, but which sounds about white. Shortly after Congress authorized Mount Rushmore, an association just popped into being to raise funds for this big monument. And Rushmore actually did donate to his mountain.
Weird, okay.
Yeah. So this association, together with Borglum, selected the monument's figures George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, Abraham Lincoln, and Theodore Roosevelt, who to them best represented the expansion and preservation of the United States. Which is like, okay, I get it. Carving would begin in 1927. So that means at this point, 50 years had gone by, and Native peoples had been petitioning to get their sacred stolen land back this whole time, and the government is just like, nope, we're going to greenlight this things. Y'all can just be mad.
What the fuck?
Yeah.
Who does this?
We do this. So I got to talk about the sculptor. He is a piece of work. He's as beautiful as his name, Gutzon Borglum. So he was the son of polygamous Mormons from Idaho.
Oh.
Yeah. His first big construction gig was a Confederate monument.
Uh-huh. Okay.
Yeah. Borglum had no real ties to the Confederacy other than just being a really passionate white supremacist.
Yeah.
In letters, he was very concerned about, quote, a mongrel horde overrunning the Nordic purity of the West. He once said, I would not trust an Indian offhand 9 out of 10, where I would not trust a white man 1 out of 10.
What?
Weird racist flex, but okay.
Shut up, dude.
Thank you. There's such a weird debate about this guy's background. A lot of people are saying that he was a member of the KKK, but other people are like, no, he just had friends in the KKK. But it's like, who fucking cares? Like, the amount of hand-wringing makes me suspicious, makes me think that, like, he clearly was in.
Yeah.
So I have a quote from Wikipedia. It says, while it has been claimed that Borglum was a member of the Ku Klux Klan, an article in the Smithsonian Magazine denies that there is proof that he officially joined the KKK.
So maybe, probably, but like we can't prove it, so let's not talk about it anymore.
However, Wiki went on to say, literally the next sentence, he became deeply involved in Klan politics, attending Klan rallies, and serving on Klan committees.
What?
Kind of sounds
so
like
he's in the KKK.
Just say he's in the Klan and it's okay. But I think this is prior to 2020 when we started to call a spade a spade. This is, yeah. I will have articles after articles that talk about, was he not? Does it matter? Kind of doesn't matter. But
I mean, he was a piece of shit one way or the other, but like, he was a member. He's going to meetings. He's involved in policy.
Yes.
Like,
yes.
They just like invite like some Joe Schmo from down the street to like, hey, do you want to be involved even though you're not a member? That's not how this works.
It doesn't make any sense, but it was everywhere. Like,
Jesus Christ.
It's so thin. All of the like, oh, I don't know. It's just like, it's okay to say that he was in the Klan. Dude's dead. Like, let's just move on. So his well-documented involvement with the Klan started in 1915 when he won the commission to build a monument at Stone Mountain in Georgia.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I feel like Stone Mountain came up a little bit in my research.
It's basically like Mecca for the Klan.
Okay.
It's where the Klan reformed and reconstituted itself post-Reconstruction.
Huh.
Racists so fired up by The Birth of a Nation, that movie, they like stormed up to the top of this mountain and they staged a rally and they burned a cross on Thanksgiving. I'm just like, how wholesome. Cool.
Thanksgiving.
In 1915. And then from then on, it just became this meeting place for the Klan.
Okay, sure.
Like an unofficial monument to white supremacy. So this project at Stone Mountain was sponsored by the Daughters of the Confederacy.
Imagine that.
Yeah. Borglum was approached by them to sculpt a big old bust of Robert E. Lee. Okay. He accepted, but he told the committee, ladies, a 20-foot head of Lee on that mountainside would look like a postage stamp on a barn door. Mm-hmm. So this is just what he does. He's just like, I like your idea, but I'm going to do this thing that I want to do that's bigger. He basically convinced them that what they really wanted was an image of Lee, Jefferson Davis, Stonewall Jackson, riding around the mountain on horses, followed by troops. Like, he had this whole vision. Okay. The dude was very unstable and very hard to work with and just had all these grand visions and not so much follow through on certain things. But they agreed. They're like, okay, yeah, that works too. He also agreed to add an altar to Stone Mountain, but he's not in the KKK, you guys.
Oh my God, for fuck's sake.
This was a special request from Karen, who wrote to him. I didn't write down her name, I just said Karen.
Yeah. Karen was a very popular name in 1915.
Yeah. She wrote, I feel it is due to the KKK that saved us from Negro domination and carpetbag rule that it be immortalized on Stone Mountain. Negro domination.
Yeah.
Talk about projection. Do you know what carpetbag rule?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like when Northerners come to the South and tell them how to act.
Well, you know,
or like
originally,
agitate or something.
People were like happy to have carpetbaggers come down because they were like, shit was so fucked up that they were like, we need help. But then after Reconstruction, they were painted as having been this like horrible force for like buying up all the Southern land and trying to like
influence a place where they're not living.
Yeah.
Yeah. In 1925, this is 10 years into the project, he had only done Lee's head, even though he had
10 years
10 years. Just did the head. Borglum, he was dismissed from the project. He had like a fit, basically. He smashed all his models and then was just fired.
Jesus.
And the work that he did, just the head, was blasted out of the mountain.
Really? Mm-hmm. So it's not there anymore?
Not there, yeah. 2 years later, Borglum moved on to Mount Rushmore. But he always hoped to return to Stone Mountain because it was kind of like his passion project. Uh-huh. When they found a new sculptor for Stone Mountain, Borglum was so pissed.
Yeah.
He was so pissed, not because... he was pissed because it was being finished by someone who wasn't him, but the man was Jewish. So
you can't have that.
Not only racist, he was a very, very, very passionate anti-Semite.
Yeah, imagine that.
In an essay Zero People asked for, called The Jewish Question, he said a whole bunch of dangerous racist nonsense that I'm not going to repeat because fuck him, he doesn't get any quotes.
Thank you.
He was big trash. I started to look into it and I'm just like, no, that's okay. He wrote something, an essay called The Jewish Question. Like, I know.
That's enough.
I know what it is.
We get the point.
Yeah. So, Rushmore, as we know it, began in 1926, and it continued for 14 years. This is funny. During this time, Borglum vetoed an idea to add Susan B. Anthony's likeness to the mountain. Oh. A group of women had petitioned First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt to write a letter on their behalf to Borglum, and she did. And he's like, nah.
I hate him.
Heaven forbid a woman be immortalized. Like, women might get all sorts of crazy ideas about changing the country for the better. Can't have that. So even though the original plan for this monument was hatched solely to bring in tourist monies to South Dakota, it became so much more thanks to Borglum and his leanings. I mean, it's became a monument to white supremacy.
Yeah.
Full stop, period.
Yeah.
Since each president selected did their part to create systems that made their oppression the law of the land. Mm-hmm. So let's chat presidents, or according to Borglum, America's founders and builders. First up, Washington. At a time when the U.S. was still very weak, many Indian nations were quite strong and represented a significant threat to our baby nation. Mm-hmm. His strategy was to offer Indian tribes a fair price for their land. Washington hoped that this fair price would allow the U.S. to expand with minimal bloodshed, and at the same time treat Indian people with justice. Justice, that's his words, justice. Yeah. However, when Native people refused to sell their ancestral lands, he was quick to just wage war on them.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, so much for justice. This is how he got the codename Town Destroyer by Native peoples for his scorched earth campaigns against the Iroquois nation prior to and during the Revolution.
Wow.
Yeah, so
cool. I did not know that.
We're off to a great start. This is just the beginning.
Good times.
Next up, Jefferson. The man who referred to American Indians as the merciless Indian savages in the Declaration of Independence.
Really?
Merciless Indian savages. No biggie. Oh my God. It was as president that he had the greatest impact, though. He pursued an Indian policy that wanted to guarantee U.S. security, which I understand. However, he also wanted to bind Indian nations to the U.S. through treaties. The purpose of these treaties were to take land and to trade, but most importantly, to keep the nations from setting up alliances with Europe. Had they aligned with the British or aligned with the Spanish or the Portuguese? Yeah. So it was strategic. When he wasn't raping enslaved children, he was very concerned with, quote, civilizing Native peoples. Mm-hmm. Classic.
We love to civilize.
It's like, hey, maybe civilize yourself first and then, civilize others. It's like planes. We remember planes, like the emergency procedure.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah. I get what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like, let's put on our mask first before we assist others. Jefferson told his Indian agents never to coerce Indian nations into selling their lands. That would be bad. These are his words. The lands were theirs as long as they wished, end quote. But he did hope to accelerate the process. In a letter leading up to the Louisiana Purchase, Jefferson suggested if the various Indian nations could possibly be encouraged to buy goods on credit, they would likely fall into debt. They could then pay the debt off by selling lands to the government. That was his whole plan, to just get them into a debt state where they feel desperate and have to sell off their lands for whatever price. So now it is Abe's turn. Lincoln. Whew.
Where do you even start?
I'm going to actually take a drink. Lincoln was responsible for a lot of things, such as the passage of the Morrill Act that violently stole native land to create our modern university system.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, through like land grant universities used to be a thing. I guess it's still a thing.
Yeah.
Like apparently Yale is still getting a land grant. Crazy. He also is responsible for the 1862 Homestead Act.
Okay.
Which is my favorite. It's so good. This act carved out 270 million acres of land, indigenous land, obviously, and gave it away for free to white people, transferring what would have been generational wealth, native wealth, to white people. Here you go. He also oversaw the 1862 hanging of 38 Dakota men in Minnesota, as well as what is called the Navajo Long Walk.
It's a promenade.
Yeah, exactly.
A leisurely stroll.
Yes. I'm just picturing people in like Victorian garb with those little like umbrellas, like on a promenade.
A parasol, yeah.
It was a death march.
It was in that Virginia history book.
Yeah, basically.
With illustrations of them.
They still call it the Long Walk.
Oh, fuck
It's
off.
so upsetting. But this country, we love our euphemisms. Like, we love them so much. I'm going to come back to this one because it's crazy. But yeah, it's the Navajo and the Apache people that didn't die from this long walk were imprisoned. Just because, just because we're just going to keep you. We're going to take a lot of your women and children too. Say goodbye to them. He was also commander-in-chief when the Colorado militias massacred the Cheyenne people. Oops. Lastly, I'm almost done. Kind of.
Okay.
Lastly, TR. Woo! I saved the best for last.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So,
What
TR was what a mensch.
Yeah.
Teddy Roosevelt was incredibly important. He is seen as the father of the conservation movement and the creator of our national parks that we love so much. But in order for this settler colonial nation to enjoy these national parks, Native people had to be violently removed from them.
Yeah.
He carved out millions of acres in what we now know as these national parks. I'm not going to get into any specifics on how he affected Native peoples because, again, we don't have all day. And he did a lot, like a whole lot, like with his hands. I will just say that he saw life as a struggle between the courageous and the weak.
Oh, okay.
But this struggle was on racial lines. Surprise, surprise.
Yeah,
White people, who were descendants, he said, of Europeans, were like gods.
Sturdy white men.
Sturdy, well-endowed white men. The rest were lawless, lesser breeds.
Fuck off.
Roosevelt once said of Native Americans, "I don't go so far as to think that the only good Indians are dead Indians. But I believe 9 out of 10 are, and I shouldn't like to inquire too closely into the case of the 10th.
What the fuck?
What is with this, 9 out of 10 shit? 1 out of 10? Why are we doing this? I guess it was the era.
I just want to put my head down.
I know. So these are the men who are memorialized on this sacred place, on this clearly stolen Indian land. So clear was the theft of this land that the Supreme Court ruled in 1980 that the land had been acquired by false means and that the Sioux were due compensation.
In what year?
1980.
Oh, okay, thanks.
When I read that, I'm just like, fuck off. So they were awarded $106 million, which is a fucking pittance in 1980.
Oh my God.
Today, it is worth over $1 billion, which is still a pittance, in my opinion, because this quote-unquote award sits gaining interest, because as a nation, they refuse to accept the money.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Had they accepted, it would have removed any legal standing they had to the Black Hills. And you can't pay for something that was never for sale. Get out of here. It's a sacred mountain that has been completely desecrated. You think you can just pay us? So they haven't touched the money.
You don't just take it and then be like, oh, you want some money for it?
Yeah.
Fucking 60 years later?
I guess they stole the land in, 1876.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so almost 100 years. Yeah.
Ugh.
So Charmaine Whiteface, a Lakota woman and elder, said, "It's like a slap in the face to us. Salt in the wounds, as if a statue of Adolf Hitler was put up in the middle of Jerusalem."
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. So in the 5 generations since the treaty was signed and just broken, the Sioux Nation have steadily lost reservation lands to white development. They now live in really small reservations scattered throughout the region. From the time they signed this treaty, they were basically put into poverty, a poverty that has compounded over generations. Many people on the reservation live in third world conditions, all because the U.S. doesn't honor its treaties. But the Lakota people, they honor it every day. They just want the mountain back. It's so heartbreaking. Because it's like, we don't want your money. Just give us what is ours.
Yeah.
Have the honor that you claim to have. But no. So instead of pushing this false narrative about American democracy and honor, we should be looking at the facts. Similar to your story, they do feel inconvenient, but facts are facts. And this land was never for sale and it was taken illegally. These facts are directly connected to the disparities that still exist today. South Dakota has one of the highest rates of incarceration of Native peoples. There's 10% of Native people in the state, but they make up 30% of the prison population. It's not a coincidence. This is structural white supremacy in action.
Yeah.
The end. I hate to get into contemporary time, but it is worth mentioning that on June 25th, a Republican turd named Dusty Johnson introduced a bill to protect, air quotes, Rushmore.
Protect it from what?
From the liberals who are tearing down everything. Of this year.
Oh,
of this year.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, June 25th.
I mean, I guess we could blast the faces off of it, but...
His whole bill is called the Mount Rushmore Protection Act.
Uh-huh.
And it prevents the destruction or the renaming of the mountain or the monument itself. The bill says nothing of the Fort Laramie Treaty. Shocking, right?
Yeah, I mean...
What is missing, though, from a lot of the coverage of this bill is that the date, June 25th, is very significant to Native peoples. Mm-hmm. It's known as Victory Day. It was the date of Custer's last stand.
Uh-huh.
This is when really big alliance of the Lakota, the Dakota, the Cheyenne, and the Arapaho people defeated Custer.
So he chose that date on purpose.
Correct.
He's taking a page out of Trump's book, doing rallies in Tulsa.
He's a South
Juneteenth.
Dakota representative. He fucking knows this day.
Exactly.
So it's this date that is known historically. The U.S. took a huge L, and some people like Dusty, they're still fucking mad about this. But this battle, more than any others, kind of cemented this super racist image of Native people in the eyes of white settlers, that they were wild and bloodthirsty.
Violent, yeah.
Violent. It's almost as if they were looking in a mirror at themselves.
They're just trying to protect themselves.
Exactly.
What are they supposed to do?
You're taking their land, they're killing their people, stealing from them. They should just take it? Okay. Yeah, so this dude introducing this bill on this day is very significant. It's not a coincidence. He can fuck all the way off. The end.
That's the end?
That's the end, yeah. I feel like it was a sprint. I know, right? I'm just running. But I think it's a really important story.
Absolutely. We need to know this stuff.
I didn't know anything about this. I guess I started looking into it when I just saw all the controversy surrounding the 4th being there.
Yeah.
I'm just I kind of knew, but I didn't really know, at all. I didn't know about the sculptor and,
Jeez.
all of his racist and anti-Semitic shit. Like, I didn't know that Chucky was just some lawyer from New York who gets a whole fucking mountain.
That's so weird.
Right?
I mean, I guess it's not any weirder than the way Mount McKinley was named.
That's true. But at least McKinley's like a big person.
Yeah,
You're
but
right.
he wasn't at the time.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. That is right. Yeah.
So if any of you have not listened to our very first episode that we ever recorded,
this
episode
fucking
1,
insane. Yeah.
Stephanie talks about the naming of Mount McKinley. When Mount McKinley was named, he was a presidential candidate but
yeah.
not president yet.
Yeah. And it was named by a nobody from nowhere.
Yeah.
It's
weird.
a lot.
Okay.
It's a lot.
That was a real heavy episode, but I think as much as it sucks to have to like deal with the weight of these stories, we need to know this shit. This is a part of our history, and we benefit from learning.
It's like directly correlated to what's happening now.
No, absolutely.
It's like the thing
Both
about the
of these
past
stories.
again.
Yeah.
It's like it's not the past; it's right here.
Yeah.
We weren't there at the time, but we're still living in the consequences of it.
No, 100%. It's funny how our little summer break was so directly informed both of our stories.
Yeah, it's true. What has happened is why I looked into this.
You mentioned that there was another sculptor for Stone Mountain. Was it ever completed by the second this Jewish sculptor?
Yeah, he finished it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Have you?
I don't think the altar is there.
Well,
I know, but he wasn't in the KKK. You guys.
Yeah.
He's just friends with them, building an altar
and goes to all their meetings and is part of their board of like. Have you ever been to Mount Rushmore before?
No, I haven't.
It's really weird. I went once.
Is it really big, or is it not as big as you think?
It's not as big as you think.
That's what I thought.
I went on this road trip with some girlfriends after college in 2005. In 3 days, we drove from Seattle to central New York, to the Finger Lakes.
Whoa.
In 3 days. The only places we stopped along that last stretch were we stopped at Mount Rushmore, just because we're kind of driving past it anyway, so let's see. And we got there, and it's really expensive to park in the parking lot. I think it was like $30 or $40 to park in the parking lot.
Wow.
Like where the toll booth or whatever thing is, you can see it from the parking lot.
Oh.
So we all looked over and looked at it, and we're like, no.
Yeah.
And turned the car around, looped around the toll
That's
booth and just
amazing.
left. But we looked at it from the car and we're like, that's it? But then there is a little town, I think, kind of just outside of it that has souvenir shops and like...
That was its purpose.
Yeah. I think there is actually a wax museum there.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
The one big takeaway was like, I expected it to be so much bigger. It's
I
huge,
feel the
but
same
like,
way about the Statue of Liberty.
Yeah, totally.
She's very small, you guys.
Yeah. I mean,
like,
at the
I saw
time
her
of the
from the ferry, and I'm like, I'm good.
Yeah,
I don't need to go
right.
there.
Well, thank you for telling that story.
Yeah.
It was a hard one, but...
You seem like you were just stunned, and what I do, every time you're stunned, I just keep moving.
Yeah. I feel like when we first started this podcast, when we first had the idea about doing scandals in American history, I kind of thought, like, we're going to do, like, sex and drugs and, like, mistresses and all this stuff, and then... We've taken it in such a different direction that I feel like sometimes I need to get back into those like the first episode I did was like a gay senator that was a
closet.
Was closeted and was like doing all this horrible stuff against the gay community. And I feel like that was like what I thought the show was going to be about.
I think there's a way to do both.
Yeah.
I did a story about a dog, you know.
True story.
I
True story that you did. That you did.
The next one will be lighter, you guys. Stick with us.
Yeah. Yes. Well, my drink is mostly empty anyways, so I guess it's time. Yeah.
Foamy. Mm-hmm. Alcoholic foam.
Oh, it's so fucking good. America's history is juicy. We just add gin. In this case, Old Tom gin with some multiple citrus juices, egg whites, and heavy cream. And that shit is surprisingly delicious.
It goes down a little too smooth.
Thank you so much for listening to Beyond Reproach. This has been Tux Lurzel.
Stephanie Domingo.
Thank you to Tim Clough, our editor, sound engineer, and podfather. We could not do this without you.
He's also our hero.
My hero.
What?
I don't know.
What is that?
I don't know.
Okay.
On that note, bye.
Bye. Beyond Reproach is proudly recorded in Bushwick, Brooklyn. New episodes are released the first and third Monday of every month. Please note that we are not historians. We are just a couple of drunks who never shut up and love history. Full list of all source information can be found in the show notes on our website. Please take a moment to rate, review, and subscribe. Written reviews are especially important. If you like us, please do one of two things. Leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or send this episode to a friend, family member, or someone you think would be into it. Don't forget to follow us on social media. Make sure you follow us on Instagram because we post our cocktail recipes the Thursday before each full episode. Please drink along with us if you are not driving. We also have a shop at beyondreproachpod.com. Get your merch, brand yourselves. We are on Patreon if anyone would love to show us some love and throw us some nickels to support the production of our show.